than education, training, and experience, a person's level of resiliency is what often determines who succeeds and who fails. The inter-office dynamics at work is an ongoing challenge, and employees and managers are feeling the pain. Whether you own a family business or work for a Fortune 500 company, resiliency is truly the X factor. So take a coffee break and come join us for another edition of the Resiliency X Factor, or as we like to simply call it, RX, your prescription for success in business. So thank you for joining us again for another edition of the Resiliency X Factor. So Dr. Keith, I'm really excited about today's podcast. We think oftentimes about what is that prescription for building resiliency. And it oftentimes seems like one of the biggest challenges in front of us is actually managing through the stress, which is the very thing which sometimes we have to focus on when we're trying to overcome challenges in front of us and be resilient. So before we even get any further, I got to ask you, let's just start with a basic definition of what we actually mean by stress.
Yeah, and that's an important consideration because think about it. If I stopped 100 people on the street right now and I asked them their definition of stress, I'm going to get like 100 different definitions.
Oh, well, I'm glad we narrowed it down here with 100. Okay, I was afraid we'd actually push it to like 500.
Well, with that in mind, the definition that we often use is stress is the reaction of your body to change.
Okay, so say a little bit more about that. Just change with regard to anything that we do in our daily lives?
Yeah, basically. I mean, from a person walking from one room to another. Some people right now are maybe eating some food as they're listening, or they're drinking something. Their body has to metabolize it. It's going through a change. Almost everything we do, we're in a constant state of change. Therefore, we are in a constant state of stress.
Gosh, it sounds like I'm just stressing out about thinking about stress. In fact, it almost sounds like it comes from everywhere. So I've heard from people that have said that stress isn't just about the challenging or the bad things that happen to us, but is it true that stress could actually be caused by good things that are occurring to us as well?
Absolutely. It comes from both. But here's the major issue. Our bodies don't know the difference between a positive stressor or a negative stressor.
Wait a second. So you say the body doesn't know the difference at all? So if I'm feeling a little stressed for actually winning something like a Powerball jackpot, you're going to tell me that's a bad thing that's going to cause stress?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but my point is this. If I had you in one room and hooked up to your pulse rate, getting your heart rate, and we can see it on a screen in a separate room, and we had another person who, let's say, also hooked up, but let's say they came outside and their car was stolen, not there. And we would see the physiological changes taking place in the body on a screen. On our side, we could not tell who won the Powerball, who lost their car.
So we always like to take it right back to the workplace. So am I right to think then that you could have examples where an employee or a manager was recently promoted and they in turn maybe going through some of the same physiological aspects of stress as somebody who may have also lost their job?
Absolutely. And if we had those two people hooked up, we couldn't tell the difference on our end. So yes, positive stressors and negative stressors, our bodies go through the exact same physiological reaction. It's almost, and this is how we're wired. This is how we learn from one another. This is how we're wired. It's what we call the fight or flight response. And this is how all animals are created, that when we experience any type of stressor, our body either runs, avoids it, gets away, or if they had to, fight it out.
So it sounds like stress first affects us physically before anything else.
Yep, it absolutely affects us physically. If you went to, let me ask you this: if you went to your physician and you asked her, what % of illnesses, disorders that we get are related to stress, what do you think you're going to hear?
20%.
20%? Well, you're not even close. Okay, the research clearly shows we're talking about 80 to 100% of the illnesses that we get are related to stress.
80%.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not Dr. Keith's theory. If you go online and understand, begin to see the body-mind connection. It's fascinating. From diseases like irritable bowel, heart disease, back problems, grinding your teeth, many disorders that we experience are exacerbated by our stress in our lives.
So we talked a little bit about how stress can impact us physically, but I can only imagine that stress also affects us emotionally and behaviorally as well. Tell us more about it.
You are right. There's no question. It does affect us both emotionally and behaviorally. I mean, think about it. Think about the when we're under stress emotionally, Matt. What happens to many people emotionally when they're at a high level of stress?
You're usually not thinking correctly. You're not thinking as clearly, as accurately. The decisions that you may be making aren't.
But those are behaviors. Those are actual behaviors. The emotional part, if you're not doing those kinds of things, if you're not thinking clearly, or when you're under stress, like you're saying, you may feel anxious. You may get frustrated. You may get angry. These are all the emotions that people typically experience under stress. I mean, we're giving out antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication just to, like aspirin today, just to get people, through the workday, through their lives.
So, stress can really impact us then in the workplace. Specifically, what can we do then to avoid and manage some of that stress when we're at work?
Well, before we get to that question, I want to go back to the third, because we talked about stress affecting us physically, emotionally, and behaviorally. And now I'll go back to the question, what are some of the behaviors? And you said things like you're not thinking clearly. Road rage. You look at a person wrong on the road, they're taking a bat to your car. And at work, you get chewed out by your boss or something, and boy, who knows what happens. You can verbally attack back or start talking behind their back. All these kind of behaviors. So the bottom line, stress affects us physically, emotionally, and behaviorally.
All right. So now I'll take that step further and ask ourselves, what are some of the things that we can do to better manage that stress around us?
Well, man, I help people focus on 4 areas that really strengthen our immune system. Let me take a moment, and because most physicians don't take time to educate their patients regarding how we get sick. So picture my fist right now. I have a clenched fist in front of you, Matt, and let's just call that a cell, a body cell. And around the cell is a protective layer that protects our cell. We call it our immune system. And earlier we talked about how we are under chronic stress from all the change. So this stress is bombarding our immune system. And so when we are under a high degree of stress, it really is pounding our immune system, thereby weakening it. And so now I have a pen in my hand representing a virus or a bacteria. And when our immune system is so weakened by the stress, the virus or bacteria that we're exposed to every day can penetrate that cell. And when it penetrates the cell, that's when we get sick.
You're kidding me. So all this time, my parents were always telling me I was getting sick because I wasn't wearing a hat or a jacket or gloves, and now you're giving me the real answer. You
got it. Those are all just myths. That's not true. We get sick by the direct contact by the virus or bacteria, not excluding the organic diseases. I'm talking about the everyday disorders, even the common cold, by the way.
So truly the impact of stress can, as we've talked about, have all of these impacts to us all the way down to actually getting ill and being out of the workplace because we're not managing that correctly.
Oh, yeah. And what I'm seeing right now is it really concerns me that people are doing more with less. Their stress levels are high as I have seen them in the last 20, 30 years. And we often say, our plates are full. I'm starting to see these plates starting to crack. So going back to your question, Matt, about what can we do about it, I mentioned strengthening our immune system and the 4 areas that I focus on.
So when we come back from our break, why don't we take some time and hear about those 4 areas? We're talking relaxation, thinking about what we're eating and putting in our body, our physical activity, and really finding some work-life balance, if you will, with respect to that as well. So these will be some great examples of what we can do to help minimize or better manage the impact that stress has on our lives.
Absolutely.
So welcome back. We're here to talk a little bit more with regard to the impact that stress has in the workplace and our ability to really understand and manage stress effectively as we drive and build resiliency in ourselves and others in the workplace. So when we left off, we were talking about the 4 key areas that we could better effectively manage stress and use the tools of relaxation, nutrition, physical activity, and even work-life balance. So Keith, let's start first and foremost with this word relaxation.
Good. Absolutely, Matt. And we're talking about ways to strengthen our immune system so we can better deal with the stressors we're exposed to every day. And the first is what I call relaxation. So I have a question for you, Matt. And it's a question I ask many, many people in the training that I do. What do you do to relax?
Usually, maybe for me, I'd say sit on the couch, a little bowl of popcorn, turn on Netflix. See, I'm already relaxing just thinking about it.
And that is a very typical response that I hear from people, as well as things like reading or exercise. And that's great, but that's not my true definition of relaxation. Those are things that divert your mind, things that people like to do. But what I'm talking about when I talk about true relaxation is the ability to get your mind and body at rest.
So I can understand that, especially when you're at home, but in the workplace, being an HR professional for many years, you got to help me understand, how does that translate relaxation into the workplace? I've seen too many employees lose their jobs because they're, quote, relaxing too much.
Well, that's probably they're sleeping on the job, and that's not quite what I'm getting at. What I'm referring to is when I say getting your mind and body at rest, you know what I'm talking about, getting your body at rest. You know, the snoozers in the back, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. But getting your body into a state of doing nothing and your mind getting into a state of nothing. And that's the hard part. And all we need is 10 to 15 minutes a day to recharge our batteries, to give us more energy to better deal with the stress in our life.
So with the workplace being designed more often where you have open workspaces, collaboration areas, it becomes even more challenging, I think, to find those private moments just to let your mind relax. You're constantly being bombarded with employees. How do you solve that? Yeah,
well, that's a great question. And I will tell you, with many of the organizations that I have worked with, my suggestion has been find a room, a place, put in a lazy boy, take a CD or an app of what we call progressive relaxation, 10 to 15 minutes. That's all you need, as opposed to, going to the smoke room or walking outside with a cigarette, going to the cafeteria and having another Twinkie or two. Instead of doing that 15-minute break, go take 10, 15 minutes and do some progressive relaxation, relaxing your body, getting your mind into a state. And boy, many organizations have set up small rooms for their employees to take that kind of break.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, we are not talking about the snoozers. We're not talking about falling asleep, setting an alarm, waking up in 30, 40 minutes. We're talking about being in a very deep state, if you will, of relaxation, clearing that mind and preparing yourself to engage in the workforce within 10, 15 minutes.
And the evidence is clear. The research is clear, Matt. Most error in production in the workplace happen after lunch between 1:30 and 3 o'clock. Many studies have been done where they have given one group of workers progressive relaxation training versus doing nothing with another group, and the one receiving the relaxation training back up to 98% efficiency and accuracy.
Okay, so let's talk about number 2, which is nutrition. You kind of piqued my appetite when I heard you talking about lunch breaks and Twinkies. I'm assuming that's not what we're talking about when we're thinking about nutrition and stress.
You know me, I like to keep things simple. Just think nutritionally high energy foods and low energy foods. And the low energy foods would be the amount of saturated fat we are consuming and the amount of sugar we are consuming. We have that sugar high for about 10 minutes, and then what happens is we get the sugar blues, and down we go. So think of high energy foods relative to eating just many of the things that we know and understand, and every listener understands. It's eating more fruits and veggies. And if you look at the typical dinner plate, what do you see? A big old hunk of meat, 12, 13, 15 ounces steak, and a little side dish of fruit, or veggies. We got it backwards, see? So again, keep it simple, because there's so many diseases we get are related to the stress, to the nutrition in our life.
And I think we have to look at the workplace and think about what is the workplace doing to be able to provide that type of environment. So for those organizations that have break rooms or have cafeterias, are they providing employees those healthy options, those healthy choices in order to keep people, like you said, putting the right things into their body? And for those individuals that are either working on their own or they don't have the luxury of having a cafeteria at their workplace, think about what they're bringing to the workplace in order to give them the proper energy going forward.
As well as going out to lunch and making healthy selections. And there's many companies that I go into, and their cafeteria are phenomenal. Many, many healthy choices for people. And this is critical.
Good to hear. So, number 3, physical activity. Once again, I'm wondering, is that, more than just simply moving that index finger from the elevator going from floor 2 to floor 7?
Yeah. With that in mind, you think about workers back in the 1800s versus workers today in 2000. What do you think? Physical activity in this country has increased or decreased?
I'm saying decrease.
You got it. Absolutely 75%. I mean, think about the average family back in the 1800s, okay? A family wakes up, today, a family in 2000, they wake up and, there's food readily available, throw it into a microwave. Everything is at their fingertips. Back in the 1800s, they had to walk to the store, pick up the goods, break home, walk back to the home, put the goods together, while the husband, the farmer, was walking on average 12 miles a day, miles a day.
So how can we incorporate that into the workplace as well when we're thinking about trying to be resilient, trying to effectively manage that stress? And I think some of it may be, what the organization is providing employees with regard to environments to be able to effectively get that exercise. But I think employees also have to think about consciously what they're doing day by day.
Move your bodies. Take a walk. Every hour or so, go walk around the building. During lunchtime, I've seen many, many workers, they put on their running shoes, their gym shoes, and they walk around the building. Move as much as possible. It's killing us.
So, number 4, workplace balance. The reason why I want to throw that in there is that there is a lot going on with organizations that are talking about their value proposition, what they're doing to help employees be able to have more time off. Is it the time off? Is that what we're meaning when we're talking about providing employees work-life balance?
Well, there's some of the new research is clear on it's not so much the work-life balance. I mean, people know today that, they're going to come to work for many hours in a day and they go home at night. So it's in a sense, it's balancing, but you know what? It's looking at it's creating a new paradigm. It's not so much a balance. People know they're going to come to work, and some days they're going to have to put in 12, 13 hours. On other days, maybe it's 10 hours. They understand that, and they want to work, and they want to be home with their families also. I think a bigger issue comes down to how meaningful is the work? Does a worker feel like they're contributing, like they're making a difference? Because once they know that and they understand that, then the actual hours, or the balancing act, as we often refer to it, becomes secondary.
So it's not always about a 50-50 split. We recognize that there are times when in the workplace you're going to have to put in more hours. Maybe you have a hefty project. Maybe you have some specific deadlines. And then there's other times where you may want to seek that balance out and give it more to your family. The reality is we're seeing in the workplace more than ever generationally, we're looking at a different type of work.
A very different. I mean, the baby boomers are on their way out. Millennials are taking over. We have a new generation, the Z generation, that just graduated high school not too long ago there in the workplace. They see things differently. They want to feel like they're part of a culture that's driving success, that they feel good about, that they're making a difference. That's once they work in that type of culture, actual hours are almost secondary.
So, Keith, once again, I can't thank you enough for giving us that opportunity to truly think about how we can continue to be more resilient in the workplace, particularly how stress, and oftentimes the impact stress has, impacts our ability to be successful and be resilient. So we hope you enjoyed another edition of the Resiliency X Factor, or as we simply call it, RX, your prescription for success in business. See you at the next coffee break.